Hello, everyone. Good morning. This class is for day 2 of our first full week of online learning. Hope you guys are great, and welcome back. So, a couple quick announcements before we get started, talking a little bit more about John's Gospel. First of all, directions for each day's class. Now, moving forward, I'm going to post in Blackbaud as well as Classroom. So just for the sake of simplicity and that we're all on the same page, each morning as you log in and go to my class bulletin board, you're going to see the directions for what I want you to do for that day. So right now I just have kind of some basic welcomes from last week. I'll be taking that down later today. So each day you're going to see the directions for the day of class, what you're going to do, the directions for the assignment. And your assignment you'll see in here when it's assigned, when it's due, the directions for that. Now, your assignments are going to be posted as well as the directions for the day are going to be in Blackbaud, but they're going to be completed and submitted, as we've always been doing, through Classroom. So what that means is you can find the directions for the day of class as well in here, but most importantly, you're going to be doing your classwork in here. And submitting it through Classroom. Okay, so just for the sake of clarification, you're going to see the directions for the day in Blackbaud. You're going to see any assignments that I've been given, the directions in here under the assignments tab. And when you go over to Classroom, you can complete it and submit it in the normal assignment tab. Okay, if you have any questions on that, please let me know. There's been a few follow-up questions that I've had from you guys. But again, welcome back. Day 2 of our first full week here. Many of you guys watching this video might be wondering what's the purpose of these. These are kind of the videos where I'm going to be giving you notes. The purpose for these videos mostly to give you the notes for eventual quizzes and those eventual tests that are coming a little bit further down the line. So make sure you're tuning into these videos, make sure you're watching them, getting the info, getting the notes, because when it comes time for our first quiz, which for us will be next week, I want to make sure you guys have all of the ways to access what we're kind of walking through. Okay, so the purpose of watching these is basically so you guys can get the notes and the information that you need in order to study for our assessments. Okay. Last important announcement, Archbishop Rhodey is going to be visiting us virtually this Thursday at 1 p.m. As you logged into Blackbaud this morning, you probably saw that he's going to be holding a call at a different hour for each class. For freshmen, our call will be Thursday at 1 p.m. I'll be providing a specific link to the Zoom call that you'll be receiving it from me. All you got to do is just click on it. As long as you have Zoom set up, you just have to click on that link and you'll be able to enter the call for Archbishop Rhodey. Now, in the meantime, you can start thinking of questions to ask him. There's going to be a lot of us in this call, so I'll kind of be emceeing the call and kind of directing different people who would like to talk and who would like to ask a question. But he wants to be with you guys and give you guys lots of really cool info. So think of great questions for him. I'm also incentivizing. You can get a bonus point on next week's quiz by thinking of a question to ask him during our call this Thursday. So make sure you mark your calendar. This Thursday, 1 p.m., that's going to replace our final day of class this week. So 1 p.m. Thursday, that's our final class for the week, will be that call with him. Okay, so make sure you mark your calendars for that, and I'll be grading attendance as well. Okay, have any questions on that? Shoot me a message. Now, kind of the boring stuff. Let's move into what we've been covering with John's Gospel. So your homework from day 1 was basically to learn, kind of review a little bit about the introduction to John's Gospel and how it is a comparison and how it's similar to Genesis chapter 1. Okay, so we read in John chapter 1 that Jesus is the Word of God made flesh, who was there at the beginning, who was made man. And if you're reading John's Gospel as someone who knows the Hebrew Bible, you're going to say, oh, this is exactly as Moses' Bible, or Moses wrote Genesis chapter 1. It's very similar. Then you have, so let me back up a little bit. So the whole purpose of these 4 points that you see here on the screen, these notes are kind of the 4 ways in which John's Gospel so comparing to the three synoptic gospels, which are Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are emphasizing Jesus's divine nature. So what that means is, remember, John's gospel really focuses on the fact that Jesus is God made man. Okay, so how does he do that? How in his gospel do we see him kind of emphasizing the fact that Jesus is God? Okay, the first way we're going to look at today kind of relates to the homework that you guys did, the intro to John's gospel, John chapter 1. And the second way, which will kind of translate a little bit more into your homework, is the 7 signs in John, the 7 miracles in John's gospel that are referred to as signs. Okay, John refers to these things as signs. The other gospels call them miracles. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, and that will translate into your homework for tomorrow. So first of all, in John chapter 1, we read that in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Really beautiful words. So how this connects back to Genesis 1, we hear about a beginning. We hear that in the beginning there was God, and in the beginning that there was this Word, and this Word was with God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him. So in the beginning, God, in Genesis 1, God creates the universe. All things were made through God. Without this Word was not made anything that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Really beautiful words. So we hear in John's gospel about darkness and light. We hear about God in Genesis 1 making life and light, all this wonderful creation. Through words, God creates things. He speaks things. He said, let there be light. There was light. Let there be plants and animals, etc. So when we're reading John, we should think, well, this sounds exactly like what we hear about in Genesis chapter 1. So there's so many similarities between these two. So John is immediately bringing his readers to understand that this Jesus, this Word made flesh, a few verses further down in verse 14, it says, this Word, which was there in the beginning and through everything was made, and through him was the light, and the light that shone in the darkness was not overcome by it. Through this Word, that all came to be through the Word, this Word actually became flesh. Okay, so like flesh, you think of like bones and skin and blood. You think of a man, a person. So this very Word of God became man and dwelt among us, full of grace and truth. We have held his glory as of the only begotten Son from the Father. Okay, so he's referring to Jesus here. So he's not referring to some ordinary man, okay, in the intro to John. So John's kind of setting the stage that this Jesus is the only begotten Son of the Father, who is there with the Father at the beginning, and the creation of all things took place through him, okay? So this isn't any ordinary man that John is about to write a gospel about. So as we can see, if this is the case, John's account of Jesus begins differently. Okay, so what that means is his gospel kind of centers around, he's setting the stage that this gospel is going to center around not just an ordinary man. Rather, it's going to center around the Word of God made flesh, the only Son of the Father, the eternal Father whom the Israelites have worshipped for years. This very same God has been made incarnate through this person that we call Jesus, okay? So that's kind of the first way in which John emphasizes the divine nature of Jesus, John chapter 1. The second is through these various signs that John gives us. So in the other Gospels, remember when we looked up all those miracles in the Bible, there's similar miracles and miracles shared in common. John doesn't refer to them as miracles. Rather, he refers to them as signs, okay? So think about signs for a moment. Why do we need signs? Why do we ask for signs? Sometimes signs help us to come to a deeper faith and a deeper belief by seeing them, okay? So many times in our lives we ask for signs. Well, God sometimes gives them to us in order to lead us to a deeper belief and trust in who God is. So what is the purpose of a sign? That's going to be a little bit more related to your homework, but think about the many, many signs that you see every day. You look at billboards, you look at traffic lights, you look at stoplights. Each of them communicates a different message to us. The 7 signs in John, the turning of the water into wine, the healing of the official son, the feeding of the 5,000, the walking on the water, the healing of the blind man, or the man born blind, that was the gospel we just heard on Sunday's Mass. Lazarus being raised from the dead, and the resurrection appearance at the Sea of Tiberias. Each of those are described as signs in John's gospel. And a sign, Jesus uses those not to just be fancy or show off the fact that he is God incarnate, God made man, but rather to lead them to hopefully respond with belief and faith that he is the Christ, that he is the Messiah, that he is the one that the Jewish people have been waiting for. So the purpose of these signs are to basically lead people deeper to faith and belief and to have a relationship with Jesus. Okay, so that's kind of where we'll leave off today. So these are the first of the two ways in which John emphasizes the divine nature of Jesus. The intro to John's gospel, what I just kind of went over there, and the 7 signs in John. So for your homework, you're going to put this into practice a little bit. So the first thing I want you guys to do is learn a little bit more about what we mean by the Word made flesh. One of the most famous Catholic prayers is called the Angelus. You're going to read an article about it. And using the words of the prayer, you're going to find as many New Testament references that you can find that connect back to that prayer and list those in the first part of the assignment. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to pick one of the miraculous signs of Jesus in John's gospel. So one of these 7 right here. And you're going to go in and read a little bit more about it. So turning of the water into wine, John chapter 2, Lazarus being raised from the dead, John chapter 12. You can find it pretty easily as you flip through John's gospel. But pick one of those 7 and read it. You're going to learn a little bit more about what the sign or miracle that Jesus performs. So describe kind of what happens. And then think a little bit more deeply about what I just said about signs. What do literal everyday signs communicate to us? So based on those 2 answers, then I want you kind of to connect. What do you think Jesus is trying to communicate to the observers of that sign in that particular story that you read? What do you think he's trying to show them? Don't say something as simple as, well, he's trying to show them that he is God. Go a little bit deeper than that. These are reflection questions. And then last, how do the observers of the sign react? When we see a sign, we can react in many ways. So how in that story do the observers react? And based on their reaction, what do you think this teaches us Christians about the relationship between seeing and believing? Because oftentimes we see things that are extraordinary, but it doesn't lead us to faith. And sometimes we don't see anything at all, and we still believe. So learn a little bit more about that particular sign and what you think it teaches us about faith in Jesus and the relationship that kind of faith has to do with seeing signs. Okay, so that is all I have for today. Shoot me a message with any questions you guys have. Again, reminder, start thinking of questions to ask Archbishop Rhodey, who's visiting us virtually Thursday at 1 p.m. So make sure you mark your calendar for that day. Again, always available through Blackbot or through our bi-weekly Zoom calls if you have questions or need any sort of help or guidance. Without further ado, have a great day.